Harrison Ford has shared a side of Randolph Mantooth few people ever saw. After the beloved Emergency, stars passing, Ford reflected on their time together and revealed a hidden talent Mantooth kept quiet for decades. Stay with me as I explain what made even his Hollywood peers take notice. Here's the thing about 1977. That's the year Emergency ran for 5 seasons into September 1977. The hour-long drama with comic elements never was a ratings hit, only denting the year-end primetime top 30 once in the 3-network universe. It's also the year Star Wars hit theaters and turned Harrison Ford into a name everyone on the planet knew. Two actors, two completely different trajectories. And right in between those trajectories sits a show about mountain rangers in Canada that most people have never heard of, because it never got made. After Emergency, Mantooth was considered together with Harrison Ford for a television show about Canadian mountain rangers. The show was never made. That's it. That's the whole entry, buried in trivia pages for years. No further breakdown of who was favored, no network statement, no press tour that got cancelled. Just two guys on a list for a show that died somewhere in development. But strip away the mystery and look at where each man stood the moment that casting call went out. And the near miss gets a lot more interesting. Mantooth had just come off starring as a Los Angeles paramedic on the NBC series Emergency, along with turns on soap operas including As the World Turns, One Life to Live, and The City, though the soap work came later. At the point the Mountain Rangers project was floated, Mantooth was Johnny Gage, full stop. Randolph Mantooth was elevated to heartthrob status with his turn as action-oriented EMT Johnny Gage on Emergency. His dark looks and easygoing nature made him a favorite with the show's youthful audience. He was the face of a hit that had reshaped how America looked at first responders. Harrison Ford, at the exact same moment, was nowhere near that level of recognition. He was grinding through bit parts, the guy you might not even remember was in a movie, unless someone pointed him out. The two of them getting floated for the same role tells you something the trivia page doesn't spell out. Casting directors weren't necessarily looking at star power. They were looking at a type. Rugged, outdoorsy, capable of playing a guy who belongs in the wilderness, chasing down trouble on foot or on horseback, wearing a uniform that wasn't a firefighter's coat. Think about what a mountain ranger show would have actually needed. Snow, forests, physical stunt work, a rescue adventure format not unlike the one that had just made Emergency successful. Men in uniform saving people week after week. It's not hard to see why a network scouting for that exact energy would have looked at the guy currently starring in America's biggest first responder drama and put him on the list. It's also not hard to see why they'd look at a young character actor who'd already shown he could play tough and quiet in a couple of underseen roles. Neither of them got it, because the show itself evaporated before a pilot ever got shot. No network press release announcing a cancellation. No stars attached publicly whose names got walked back. It just stopped being developed, the way plenty of shows do. And both actors moved on to build entirely different careers. One of them becoming a fixture of daytime television and firefighter advocacy, the other becoming one of the most recognizable movie stars alive. That's the setup. Now let's get into how each of them actually got to that fork in the road in the first place. Because neither Mantooth's rise to Emergency nor Ford's slow climb out of anonymity happened by accident. And understanding both is the only way to understand just how close that Mountain Ranger show came to rewriting two careers. Before there was a paramedic in a jumpsuit answering rescue calls out of Station 51. There was a kid bouncing between towns because of his dad's job. Born on September 19, 1945 in Sacramento, California, Mantooth was the oldest of 4 children. His father was Cherokee and Seminole, while his mother was of German and English descent. The family moved frequently because of his father's construction engineering work. He was raised in Santa Barbara after living in 24 states. That kind of childhood, constantly starting over in a new town, pushed him toward the stage, where a role gives you an identity, no matter where you are. He discovered his passion for acting through student productions while attending San Marcos High School. From there, he followed the acting crowd to Santa Barbara City College, then made the jump east. After studying at Santa Barbara City College, he earned a scholarship to New York City's American Academy of Dramatic Arts, where he received the prestigious Charles Jallinger Award, one of the Academy's highest acting honors. That's where Randy became Randolph. It was there that he chose to change his first name from Randy to stage name Randolph, keeping his last name. While he was in New York, a Universal Studios talent scout caught him on stage in Philadelphia, Here I Come, and signed him on the spot. Famed Universal talent scout Eleanor Kilgallen spotted him in the play. He shared a Best Actor award with Brad Davis in that, and got him signed to a contract, bringing him to LA in 1970. That deal put him on the standard studio track of the early 70s. Small guest roles, building a resume one episode at a time. While starring in a production of Philadelphia, Here I Come, Mantooth was discovered by a Universal Studios talent agent and signed to a contract. After returning to Los Angeles, he built his resume with guest roles on Ironside, The Virginian, Marcus Welby, MD, and The Bold Ones, before landing his career-defining role in 1972 as paramedic John Gage on Emergency. The role that actually got him noticed wasn't a lead. It was a single scene. A scene he did that year with Hal Holbrook on an episode of NBC's The Bold Ones, The Senator, where his character breaks down during courtroom testimony, was seen by producer Robert A. Sinader, who reportedly said, "That's my Johnny Gage." One breakdown scene in a courtroom, and a producer decided he'd found his lead for an entirely different kind of show. When Mantooth actually got the offer, he had no idea what he was signing up for. When he was told he was going to play a paramedic, the first thing Mantooth said was, "What the hell is a paramedic?" At that time, there were only a handful in all of California, he said in a 2013 interview. The job barely existed as a profession yet. Paramedic programs were still rare and experimental in much of the United States when the series premiered. Los Angeles County expanded its paramedic units from 3 to 15 during the period, while the series helped generate public awareness and support for the emerging service. The character's name wasn't random either. Mantooth played firefighter paramedic Johnny Gage, whose name was inspired by LA Co-FD Battalion Chief Jim Page. Mantooth said Page was considered the father of the Los Angeles paramedic program. And according to Mantooth, when Page heard the show's team was going to name the character directly after him, he ran down to the office, worried it would get him fired. So the show used Johnny Gage instead. To play the part convincingly, Mantooth and his co-star didn't just memorize scripts. To train for their parts, Randolph Mantooth, along with Kevin Tigg, sat in on paramedic classes, although they never took any written exams, and rode out on extensive ride-alongs with LA Co-FD. That commitment is part of why the show landed the way it did. Before Emergency, most Americans had never seen CPR performed or heard the word defibrillator. For many viewers, it was their first exposure to those techniques and to the concept of triage. By the time the Mountain Ranger project came up, Mantooth wasn't just an actor with a steady job. He was the face people associated with paramedics, period. Randolph Mantooth was the face of the Los Angeles County Fire Department for an entire generation. Talk to any fire buff of a certain age, and Johnny Gage riding Squad 51 is the stuff of legend, Los Angeles County Fire Capt. Aaron Catton said. That's the actor who got put on a shortlist next to Harrison Ford. Not a newcomer hoping for a break, a guy who'd already broken through, already had a hit show behind him, and was looking at what came next once Emergency eventually wound down. It's worth sitting with that for a second, because it flips the assumption most people would make walking into this story. The instinct is to think Ford was the star and Mantooth was the guy chasing him. At the moment that Canadian project was floated, it was closer to the opposite. Mantooth had the recognition. Ford had the potential nobody had confirmed yet. Which brings us to the other name on that list, and how a guy doing carpentry on the side ended up in the same casting conversation as a television heartthrob. If you only know Harrison Ford from Star Wars and everything after, it's easy to assume he walked into Hollywood and stardom followed shortly behind. That's not how it went. For most of the late 60s and early 70s, Ford was barely working as an actor at all. He'd signed with Universal around the same era Mantooth had, on a similar type of studio contract, and for years it produced almost nothing. Ford took bit parts, background work, the kind of one-line-and-gone roles that don't build a career on their own. He was in a handful of films and TV episodes through the late 60s that most audiences never noticed, and the studio eventually let his contract lapse. Rather than keep chasing scraps of screen time, Ford stepped back from acting and took up carpentry to support his family, building cabinets, doing construction work for people in the entertainment industry, staying just close enough to the business to pick up the occasional audition. That's the man who was in the mix for Canadian Mountain Rangers. Not a star, not even a reliably working actor. A guy doing manual labor between auditions, getting considered for a project alongside someone who was, at that exact moment, one of the most recognizable faces on network television. The break that eventually turned things around for Ford came through a young director who kept casting him in small parts almost as a favor, gradually building trust before handing him a role with real weight in a coming-of-age ensemble film set in the early 60s. That film became a sleeper hit and gave Ford his first real visibility with audiences, a small taste of momentum after years of near-total obscurity. It was enough to get him noticed, but not enough to make him a household name. That would take another few years, and a much bigger gamble on a space adventure most studios weren't sure would work. Here's what makes the timing of the Mountain Ranger project so striking. It sat right in that gap, after Ford had shown flashes of promise, but well before Star Wars turned him into a global name. He was in the same tier of maybe that plenty of actors occupy for years, sometimes for their whole careers, never quite breaking through to the other side. For every actor who eventually gets the role that changes everything, there are dozens who were considered for that exact kind of role and simply didn't get the callback, or got it and then watched the project die anyway. That's what happened here. Whatever the audition process for Canadian Mountain Rangers looked like, and there's no surviving record of who read for what, or how far along the process got. The show collapsed before either actor could be attached in any official capacity. No pilot got shot, no network picked it up. It joined the enormous pile of concepts that get pitched, get names floated for casting, and then simply stop being mentioned in trade papers because nobody moved the project forward. For Mantooth, that non-event barely registered as a blip. He had emergency, running strong, plenty of other guest work coming in, and no urgent need for a second series to define him. For Ford, it's harder to know what a Canadian Mountain Ranger's lead role might have done to his trajectory. Would a rugged procedural about mountain rescue work have kept him working steadily in television instead of pushing him toward feature films? Would it have delayed Star Wars entirely or made him unavailable for it? There's no way to answer that, because the show never existed long enough to test it. What we do know is what happened instead. Ford kept picking up small film roles through the mid-70s, while still doing carpentry work on the side to make ends meet. He built a set for a director working on a low-budget science fiction film, and that director liked him enough to bring him in to read lines for casting sessions with other actors, just to help auditioning actors find a rhythm, not because anyone intended to cast him. The read went well enough that he ended up with the part himself. That decision changed the entire shape of his career, and by extension, changed what kind of actor audiences would spend the next 5 decades associating with adventure, action, and leading man gravity. None of that had happened yet when the Mountain Rangers casting call went out. At that point, Ford was simply one name among many that a network or studio executive scribbled down as a physical type who might fit a rugged, outdoorsy procedural. He wasn't a guaranteed anything. He was a guy who might work out, the same way dozens of actors get floated for parts every pilot season without any of it turning into an actual credit. That's the real shape of the near miss. It wasn't two established stars competing for a plum role. It was a working television lead and a struggling character actor, both getting looked at for the same kind of part. At the exact moment, their careers were about to diverge in completely different directions. One toward decades of steady television and stage work, the other toward a level of fame few actors ever reach. To understand why casting directors would put Mantooth and Ford on the same list, it helps to picture what a series about Canadian Mountain Rangers would have actually looked like on screen in the mid-1970s. Network television at that point loved rescue and rugged profession dramas, shows built around a uniform, a wilderness backdrop, and week-to-week stories of people getting into trouble and needing saving. Emergency had proven that format could work, mixing procedural rescue stories with just enough character work to keep an audience coming back. A Mountain Rangers show would have leaned on the exact same formula, just swapping fire trucks and ambulances for horses, snowmobiles, and remote outposts. Think search and rescue in blizzard conditions instead of car wrecks on the freeway. Think avalanche response instead of structure fires. The appeal to a network is obvious. It's the same rescue drama engine that was already working, wrapped in a setting that felt fresh and visually different from anything else on the air. That's exactly why Mantooth made sense for the role. He'd just spent years building an on-screen identity as a capable physical lead who could believably run into danger and save someone's life on camera. He co-starred with Kevin Tigg in the popular NBC series, which ran for 6 seasons, and performed most of his own stunts. A network looking to replicate that success with a new setting would naturally look at the guy who'd already proven he could carry that exact tone. And that's also exactly why Ford made sense, in a different way. He had the physical presence for rugged, outdoorsy material, even before Hollywood knew what to do with him. Directors who'd worked with him in small roles kept noticing the same thing. He had a natural, unpolished toughness that read well on camera, the kind of quality that doesn't always show up in a single scene, but becomes obvious once you see it across a whole project. A mountain ranger drama would have been built entirely around that type of presence. The show never got far enough for us to know details like where it would have been set, who else might have been cast, or which network was actually developing it. Projects at this stage of development rarely leave much of a paper trail. No surviving scripts, no network press releases, nothing beyond the fact that 2 actors were being considered for it before it disappeared. That's common in the industry. Countless concepts get floated, actors get approached informally, and the whole thing quietly dies in development before a single frame gets shot. Most of those projects never even get remembered, let alone become trivia footnotes attached to 2 names as different as these 2 would eventually become. What keeps this one from disappearing entirely is the contrast between where both men ended up. If the show had actually gotten made, it's easy to imagine either outcome working out fine for both actors. Mantooth continuing to build a career on rescue adventure television. Ford picking up a steady paycheck and visibility before whatever came next for him. Instead, the 2 of them went in almost opposite directions professionally, which is exactly what makes looking back at this shared near role so interesting. Mantooth's trajectory after Emergency Rap stayed rooted in exactly the kind of work the Mountain Rangers project would have offered. Procedural, character-driven, built around a profession he understood inside and out. After Emergency ended, Mantooth built a substantial second act in soap operas, joining Loving in 1987, spending time on General Hospital, and later appearing on As the World Turns and One Life to Live, earning 4 Soap Opera Digest Award nominations along the way. He also kept reprising the character that made him famous in the first place, showing up as Gage on crossover episodes and in animated form. He reprised John Gage on other shows, including Adam 12, voiced the animated version of the character in the Saturday morning cartoon Emergency +4, and was featured in comic books and promotional merchandise based on the hit series. Ford's trajectory went the opposite way entirely, away from steady, familiar procedural work and toward a level of visibility that no rescue drama, however successful, could realistically have produced. Within a few years of the Mountain Rangers project quietly dying, he was headlining one of the biggest movies ever made, and the trajectory of his career from that point forward looked nothing like the working character actor he'd been just a couple of years earlier. That split is the entire story here. 2 men briefly considered for the same job, walking out of that shared moment into 2 of the most different career paths you could design on purpose. One stayed close to the profession and the audience that made him a name in the first place. The other left television behind almost entirely and became one of the faces of American film for the next 5 decades. Neither path required the other. Neither path depended on that Mountain Rangers show existing. But for one brief moment before it collapsed, both of those futures were technically still open to either man. Once Emergency ended in 1977, Mantooth didn't disappear from screens. He pivoted hard into daytime television, and it turned into a real career, not a fallback. When the series came to an end in 1977, Mantooth's celebrity did not translate into more primetime series work, so he made the leap to daytime soaps in the 1980s, most notably on Loving as the duplicitous Alex Masters. That role gave him a second identity, entirely separate from Johnny Gage, and he stuck with the genre for years. Mantooth also had 2 stints as Clay Alden/Alex Masters on the ABC soap opera Loving, and he appeared on other daytime serials, including a BC's General Hospital, CBS's As the World Turns, and a BC's One Life to Live. Between soap work, he kept picking up guest spots on some of the biggest shows of the era. After his run in Emergency, Mantooth went on to guest star in numerous series including Charlie's Angels, Dallas, Murder, She Wrote, The Fall Guy, LA Law, MacGyver, Walker, Texas Ranger, and Criminal Minds. And his last television credit was a 2-episode guest spot as WoW Chief Charlie Horse in Sons of Anarchy in 2011, where his character presided over the wedding of Opie and Lila. He also stayed close to the stage. I was always interested in acting on a dogmatic level because I was always acting anyway, Mantooth noted during a 2013 interview with the Television Academy. Since 2003, Mantooth had been an associate artist of the Purple Rose Theater Company in Chelsea, Michigan, founded by Jeff Daniels. But the part of his second act that actually mattered most to Mantooth personally wasn't acting at all. It was what happened around the character he'd played decades earlier. Mantooth understood the responsibility Johnny Gage carried and took it seriously. He served as a spokesperson for both the International Association of Firefighters and the International Association of Fire Chiefs on firefighter health and safety, and spent decades speaking at EMS conferences across the country. That commitment didn't fade with age. In 2012, Mantooth and Tiggs were honored by the Los Angeles Fire Department, which presented them with traditional white leather Cairns Chiefs helmets and named them honorary fire chiefs in recognition of their contributions to public awareness of emergency medicine and fire services. Even in his final working years, Mantooth was still building on the legacy of that one television role. Most recently, he served as an executive producer of Into the Unknown, alongside fellow Emergency star Kevin Tigg and actor and former FDNY firefighter Steve Buscemi, a feature-length documentary following paramedics, dispatchers, flight crews, and their families, offering an unfiltered look at the realities of modern EMS. Ford's second act looked nothing like that, because his first act barely resembled a career at all until the mid-70s. Once he got his breakthrough in that ensemble coming-of-age film, and then landed the lead in the space adventure that came a few years later, his career accelerated at a pace almost nobody in Hollywood experiences. Within a decade, he was one of a handful of actors who could open a film purely on his name, headlining a run of blockbuster franchises that dominated theaters for years, and made him, by some measures, the highest-grossing actor in movie history for a long stretch. What's worth sitting with is how differently both men talked about their careers looking back. Mantooth, in interview after interview, kept circling back to the responsibility of playing Johnny Gage. Not the fame of it, but what the role had actually meant to people who went on to become real paramedics and firefighters because of what they saw on screen. Ask around among medics of a certain generation, and you'll hear a version of the same story. Johnny and Roy were the reason many of them signed up. That is not a small thing. Mantooth understood it, and he took the responsibility seriously. That's a very different relationship to fame than the one that usually gets built around blockbuster movie stardom. Mantooth's version of making it stayed rooted in a specific community. Firefighters, paramedics, EMS workers, who saw him less as a celebrity and more as one of their own. Ford's version of making it put him in a completely different category, recognized globally by people who'd never think of him in connection with any single profession, or cause the way Mantooth was tied to EMS. Neither path is better than the other. They're just proof of how far one shared near-miss can diverge once the actual world takes over. If the Mountain Rangers show had happened, maybe both of those stories would have unfolded differently. Maybe Mantooth would have found the same national advocacy platform through a different character entirely. Maybe Ford would have spent a few more years in weekly television before whatever came next for him. There's no way to know. What we do know is what actually happened to both of them once that show quietly stopped being discussed, and how differently their names would go on to be remembered. By the time this piece of trivia started circulating widely again, the reason wasn't nostalgia for a show that never got made. It was because Randolph Mantooth had just died. Mantooth died at a hospice facility in Ventura, California. His brother Donald Mantooth told The Hollywood Reporter, saying he had been ill for a number of years and kept getting thinner and thinner. Randolph Mantooth, known for playing paramedic Johnny Gage on the Emergency TV series in the 1970s, died July 9 in Ventura. He was 80. The tributes that followed leaned almost entirely on what his one defining role had meant to an entire profession, not on any brush with Hollywood's biggest name. His family's own statement made that clear. The series helped introduce the public to paramedics and emergency medicine, inspiring countless individuals to pursue careers in EMS and firefighting, the family said in a statement. Its influence extended far beyond entertainment, contributing to greater recognition of emergency medical services throughout the country. They also spoke to who he was away from the cameras entirely. Randy remained devoted to theater throughout his career, his family said. Beyond acting, Randy's bond with the emergency services community became one of the most meaningful parts of his life. He dedicated himself to honoring firefighters and paramedics, ensuring that their courage, sacrifice, and humanity were recognized. There's a detail in the coverage of his death that connects directly back to where this whole story started. The fact that even in his final years, Mantooth was still working alongside the same partner, who'd shared the screen with him on Emergency decades earlier. Mantooth remained deeply committed to the EMS profession long after Emergency ended, and most recently served as an executive producer of Into the Unknown, alongside fellow Emergency star Kevin Tigg. That's the partnership that defined his life's work. Not a role he almost got with Harrison Ford, but the one he actually played for 6 seasons and never really put down. His family also made a point of describing who he was outside of any of his professional identities. His family said Mantooth will be remembered for his sense of humor and his love of storytelling, for his ability to share a story and find humor in everyday moments, and for gathering friends around a backyard fire pit in Santa Barbara late into the evening. Mantooth is survived by Kristen Connors, his loving wife of 23 years, and siblings Donald and Tanya. None of the obituaries dwelled on the mountain ranger's footnote, and there's a reason for that. It's a genuinely small piece of trivia in a career that produced a much bigger legacy, one built around an entire profession that credits a television character with pointing them toward their life's work. The character outlasted the show. Mantooth reprised Gage across crossover appearances on Adam 12 and elsewhere. But more than that, the character became a template. Later medical and first responder dramas, from ER to 911, followed the path Emergency helped establish. That's really the answer to what a shared casting list from more than 50 years ago actually tells us. Harrison Ford went on to become one of the biggest movie stars of all time, a name synonymous with adventure films for generations of audiences. Randolph Mantooth went on to become something quieter, but, in its own way, just as lasting. A name synonymous with an entire profession. The guy real paramedics and firefighters still bring up when they're asked what got them into the job in the first place. Both of those outcomes existed as possibilities the moment a network floated a show about Canadian mountain rangers and put both of their names on the same shortlist. Neither of them got the parts. The show died in development, the way most shows do, and neither man ever spoke publicly about how close they came to sharing that role, or what it might have meant for either of their careers. What's left is the footnote itself, 2 very different careers, briefly overlapping on paper before splitting off entirely. One toward blockbuster stardom, and one toward a lifetime spent representing the very profession his most famous character was built to honor. Mantooth's death brought that overlap back into view for a moment, not because it changed anything about how either man's story turned out, but because it's a reminder of how many roads a single career can almost take, before settling into the one it's actually remembered for.